So this is a 1996 American Standard Stratocaster in original Daphne blue finish, somewhat rare color for that year. And if you'd purchased this guitar new in 1996, it would have cost you $929.99. The guitar behind me here is a Fender Player Series Made in Mexico Stratocaster. This is a new guitar. It's in Lake Placid blue, which is a limited color. And the Made in Mexico Player Series line now will cost you $849.99 retail price. So just a little over $100 difference between the original price of this guitar and the current price of that guitar. So how did we get there? Let's talk about Fender pricing. So I worked in retail in the 1990s. It sold guitars, amplifiers, music accessories. And the way pricing worked at that time, the markup on guitars was about 100% of what dealer cost was. So if a guitar had a manufacturer suggested retail price of $1,000, the dealer paid about $500 for it. And that left the dealer about 50% margin off of his cost to retail price to make a profit on. So for example, if a guitar retailed for $1,000, the dealer could discount it as much as 30% and still make $200 on that guitar. Having $500 cost in it. All that changed in 2014 for Fender. Fender got away from the old retail or manufacturer suggested retail pricing in 2014, between 2014 and 2015, and switched over to what today is the minimum advertiser MAP pricing. And if we look at the prices, I've charted out original retail prices, original list prices for Fender over the years. I'm going to put a chart up, the one I'm looking at here. This is just a collection of years from 1962 to 2022. But one of the things you're going to notice, and again, these are the original prices, none of these have been adjusted for inflation or anything, but you'll see between 2014 and 2015, the difference in price between the American Strats, this is just the American standard models for each year, in the Made in Mexico Stratocaster. So for example, the American Strats between 14 and 15, and 14, the old list price was $1,729.99, and by 2015, with the new MAP pricing, it had dropped to $1,299.99, and a similar drop in the Mexican series from $669.99 14 to $499.99 in 2015. Now, I'm going to have to make some assumptions here. I'm going to assume that the dealer pricing didn't change very much from 14 to 15, the dealer cost. So in Fender, there were some stories that were written about this at the time. And part of this was Fender trying to control price advertising across the internet. Under the old retail pricing structure that I worked under in the 90s and even after that, you did have some online places. We had places like Thoroughbred, Music Emporium, where you could buy things online. But by and large, people bought music gear at local dealers. There wasn't a lot of competition between local dealers. All that changed with the internet. So assuming that the dealer cost for the Stratocasters remained somewhat similar between 2014 and 2015, we can do some math and figure out the dealer difference in pricing of the old manufacturer suggested retail versus the new MAP or minimum advertised pricing to be able to compare apples to apples. So in order to convert retail to the new MAP pricing, if you look at the old retail prices, if you have an old retail price list, if you multiply that by 0.75, the number that you get would be somewhere similar to the differential with the MAP pricing. For example, if we look at the 2014 to 15 pricing, if we take the 14 price of $1729.99 and multiply that by 0.75, you can see that gets us pretty close to the 2015 retail price. And you can actually convert MAP pricing to the old retail or list pricing. You can do a rough calculation to get somewhere close to that. If you take the current MAP pricing and multiply it by 0.67 and then multiply that by 2, that'll give you something pretty close to a conversion between retail pricing and MAP pricing. So you can go either way with those two calculations. So if we do the math, I think it works out to something like this. So we'll say under the old retail pricing, whatever the, let's use $1,000 just as a hypothetical number, a nice round number to work off of. Under the old retail pricing, if a guitar retailed for $1,000, we'll say the dealer had about $500 in it. So he could discount it as much as 30% and still make $200 on the guitar. Under the new MAP pricing, the dealer would have about $670 in the guitar. So his cost of the guitar would be about 67% of the retail versus the old 50% of the retail. So instead of $500 under the list pricing, he would have paid about $670 under the new MAP pricing. And you know, dealers would regularly discount guitars, they still do, and off of the whatever the manufacturer suggested pricing is. Under the old list pricing, it wasn't uncommon at all, and I know when I worked in retail, it wasn't uncommon to give 30% discounts. So again, a 30% discount off of $1,000 retail with a $500 cost for the dealer is a net profit for the dealer of about $200. To get that same net pricing, again on our $1,000 hypothetical guitar under the new MAP pricing, to get that same $200 net profit, a dealer can only discount about 12%. And if we do the math, I'll put some calculations up here, you'll see it works out to about the same $200 profit for the dealer with those numbers. So again, if we put the old chart up, these are the original suggested retail prices for Fender guitars over the years, and I've just put a sampling of years in a representative sampling starting in 1962, and you can see in 1962 the advertised cost for an American Stratocaster was $289.50, and you can see how that progresses up over the years. In 1968 it was $330. Let's see, by the time we get to 1980 it's $870. Something interesting happened between 82 and 87. You'll see a pretty significant price drop there between $945 for an American Strat and $599. Something happened during that time. In 1985, CBS sold Fender to a group of investors and employees. All they acquired in the sale was intellectual property, and designs and trademarks and things. So they actually had to build a new facility and figure out how to make these things. And so there really aren't any American Fenders made in 1985. It wasn't until 1986 when Fender was able to set up, the new owners were able to set up a factory to move from the old Fullerton factory to the new Corona, California factory. And when they started making the American guitars available again, that's when we see this pricing drop. So again, none of these have been adjusted for inflation. These are the original advertised prices. By 92, we see Fender start to bring in the Made in Mexico line, and you'll see that was introduced in 1992 at $399.99, and we can see how that tracks upward along with the American Strat over the years, again until we get to 14. Now we see a price drop there on paper, but Fender's just kind of playing with numbers at this point between the old list pricing and the current manufactured advertised pricing. Dealer costs would be the same on these, or approximately, and the current prices on these, $16.99 for an American Strat and $8.49 for a Made in Mexico Strat. All right, so what I'm going to put up now, this is an adjusted price list that I put together, and this is those same years from the original price list that I just showed. This has been converted to have historic retail prices as comparable to current MAP prices as possible, and then again adjusted again for inflation using an online inflation calculator. So if we look now and we compare apples to apples, it's kind of interesting. If we look at a 1962 Strat, it was a little over $2,000 in 1962, and we can see that number is stays pretty consistent till we get up to 1980. 1980 is the most expensive retail price that we ever had for a Stratocaster. It was $2,226.32. We see it tick back down again a little bit in 82. Interesting, like we talked about a few minutes ago, the difference in price between the 1982 and 1987 models. They dropped almost $1,000, well, about $900 during that time period. And then we see it start to tick back up again after that. Pretty consistent raise in price. Again, this has been adjusted for inflation, and we see it creep up to where we are today to $1,699. So it's the most expensive Strat that has been available since 1987. Still is quite a bit less expensive than the guitars from the 1962 to the 1982 range of prices. So it's kind of interesting. And we can see the same thing with the Made in Mexico line. These just continued when they were introduced in 1992. They've just kind of gradually ticked up in price from $600 to $850 where they are today. So about a $250 increase in prices. Now the current model does have some features that are upgraded from what would have been features on the original 1992 model. Better hardware, better pickups, things like that. that. So it's probably a more expensive guitar for Fender to manufacture now. So yeah, have Fender guitars gotten more expensive? A little bit. It's not a crazy difference in price increase. If we compare apples to apples, we actually balance MAP and retail pricing, and we adjust for inflation. There's been some price increase, but Fender's added small upgrades to the guitars over the years. The modern version of the Stratocaster has some extra switching options, the treble bleed circuit, rolled fretboard edges, things that take a little bit more time and cost a little bit more money to build into the guitars. So I hope that's kind of an interesting perspective. You can look at other Fender equipment and it's going to track similarly, I think, the amplifiers, the basses, the other guitars. There have been price increases, but it's not as radical as it might look if you just look at unadjusted numbers. Anyway, thanks, and I'll see you next time.